Hi, Dr. Rob.
Hey, Tammy.
So glad you're here tonight.
You
I
see
see
what
a
a
nice,
what a
clear night
beautiful
behind you. Yeah.
what a beautiful day it is here.
Yes. Yes. It's warmed up a little bit from what you were sharing. So
Well, for me, warmed up is about 80 and I'm done, but for you, it's like 110. So I understand this.
correct. I was like, your hot temperatures are, gosh, we're having an unusually cool day today.
I
So
know. I said to Tammy, like, I'm turning on the air. She said it's only 80. So different folks, different strokes.
exactly. So
So what do
without
we got
further
today?
ado, well, we've got questions as always. I'm going to back up though. We had our first online work group for men working through the Sex Addiction 101 workbook that started last Saturday, but we have another one starting July 1st. So on seekingintegrity.com, men who would like to participate, it's a 9-hour long over 6 weeks, so 90 minutes per session, guided, structured, processing through the Sex Addiction 101 workbook that's an accompaniment to the Sex Addiction 101 book that you wrote. Gosh, that was a mouthful. So,
Well, I think what's important, by the way, did you tell them I'm going to stop in and
I
like I'm going to
had not
visit?
quite gotten to that point yet.
Well, part of the work, I think, just for you guys to know is because of the internet, it allows me and Dr. Fawcett and other experts to be everywhere. You know, like I can show up here, I can show up there, and, you know, it's really, really great. So like when we're doing an educational process and it's not therapy, it's going through the actual work of understanding how this fits together and what people need to do, I get to show up and give a lecture, but I don't have to leave my home. So I'm very happy about that. Anyway, Tammy, let's start answering questions and
Perfect.
we'll see where we get.
How long, this is from a female partner, how long do you think couples should wait to begin couples counseling after discovery?
So would you explain discovery so I can answer the question just?
Sure. Discovery is when a partner finds out that their person is unfaithful, has an addiction. You know, they've discovered it. Maybe they ran across text messages or they found emails or they overheard a phone call. I mean, whatever. But, you know, they've discovered, you know, infidelity or even addiction.
Yeah. So once a partner knows everything that's gone on, I don't think it's quite ready for couples therapy because I think that process, everybody needs, so let me try it this way. In doing this work.
Discovery, not disclosure. So let's distinguish between the two because they don't know
Okay.
everything.
Okay. So there's a whole process that needs to go on here. I would not, and just a moment for all your spouses, just to say it, who you feel comfortable, you finally know what's going on, you're pissed, you're hurt, you're angry, but some of you want to have sex with your partners because you feel like you're close now and you know all the secrets now. And I just want to say to those of you who have that question and are thinking about it, some of people think, oh, I'll have sex to keep them around, or I'll have sex to make them not leave, or whatever it is. And the reality is, I say to every partner, why would you ever have sex with someone you don't trust? And I think that is the basic for a partner. If you are not ready to trust someone, it's not a good idea to be sexual. But in answer to your question, there's a process that has to go on. I mean, you've just found out about this. And, you know, if your spouse has just found out about this, you need support just to hear from other men and women who've been betrayed. And you need to get that support as a partner so that when you sit down in therapy and you hear the whole thing, you're not alone. You have support and people to talk to. And then your spouse who's working on this needs to be an individual work, him or herself, to go through all the stuff that they want to put on this disclosure, which comes after that. Anyway, let me just answer the question. Different people have different beliefs about this, but this is mine. I think in the very beginning, like now, finding a good couples therapist for the sole reason of helping you figure out how to get through this time. What is fighting? What is a timeout? How do I keep my spouse from asking questions all day long, but still let them feel like their questions are being answered? What are my boundaries? And what are this person's boundaries? And just setting all of the structure up for the healing period that is to follow. That's a reason for couples therapy. But you're not in the beginning going to talk about intimate issues, relationship issues. You're not ready for that. There's too much anger, too much hurt. Once you get through disclosure, which is a formal hearing about it, then I think it's time, and some of the anger and hurt is gone, then I think it's time to be motivated to start healing. And I think that's what couples work is for me. It's about healing and growth. So if you guys decide after all going through all this that we don't want to be together, well, couples therapy is not indicated. And if you go through it all and you decide, okay, we want to hang in there, but boy, we have a lot of stuff to work on, that's when couples therapy happens. But let me say one more thing. often, most often, married folks and people in committed relationships people in committed relationships are used to turning to each other for support. I'm married to a woman, you're married to me, and when we're having a hard day, we turn to each other. But in this situation, a spouse really can't turn to her husband, for example, for support because she's furious at him. And even though she may love him and want the support, she also hates him and he ruined her life. So you ladies or men who've been betrayed, you need your own support because the person who betrayed you can't be that. But by the way, your job as spouses, just I say this a lot, is to get in touch with your anger, work on your anger, and decide if you want to stay with this person or not. That's really all you have to do. But us, we have a lot more work to do. And so this is how we set it up. We say, once this crisis has occurred, that the couple really can no longer turn to each other for support for a while. So we encourage each member of the couple to get a lot of support on the outside, recovery support, therapy, all that, so that when they do come back together and start working, they are in a place to deal with what they're going through with support. That's kind of how it works. A big answer, I don't know how long your process will take. That's up to you and how hard you guys are working.
Well, and one of the things, so yes, something to support the current crises that's in the situation, yes. But, if for having the person who's been unfaithful or has the addiction, do the work to stop the behavior, because otherwise you're just constantly dealing with this just happened this week, this just happened this week, and nothing's changing on those underlying issues. So it depends. And unfortunately, typical couples counselors don't have the information about addiction or even infidelity or
disclosure.
Yeah. So it's really finding qualified people to be able to support you through the journey. So
I want to say something about that, Tammy, because I was talking to a couple today who is really doing their best to heal. I mean, they're doing the best they can as a couple, and they went to see a sex therapist because they have a sex problem in their mind, but they actually have an addiction problem. And so if you go to a sex therapist, and I am one, I'm PhD in sex, I speak sex, most of what we're going to do is help people find their way through rough patches like, I don't want to be homosexual, or I don't want to be transgender, or I don't know what to do with this kink stuff. And we help validate and support people to be able to sort of be comfortable with who they are. And that's most of sex therapy, is about validating people and helping them to be able to live with who they are. But that's not what addiction therapy is like. Addiction is do this, don't do that, this is okay. It's much more directive. And most sex therapists wouldn't have a clue, no offense, because their job is to help you feel okay with what you're doing. And what we're trying to do is help you feel not okay with what you're doing. So it's a completely different work. You much more want to be an addiction person who understands sex than a sex person who maybe doesn't understand addiction.
Okay, so the next question, I'm a mid-30s male and I'm an addict. Is it possible to overcome sex addiction without inpatient programs? So I would love for you to share, talk about what we do and why that's different. So start with what we do at Seeking Integrity Los Angeles.
Well, actually, I want to start with a question, which is, I'll go back to that, but I want to start with a question, which is, and you have to smile because we're supportive of each other. I know you're excited about that. So when does someone go into residential treatment is always a question that therapists ask, that clients ask. Here's how it goes. As a private outpatient therapist who you might come see once or twice a week, I only have so many tools in my toolkit. I can help you with this, I can help you with that. Maybe we'll see each other twice a week if you need it. I might get you to go to a couple of 12-step meetings. You're still struggling. Maybe I'm going to get you to more. Maybe you're still struggling. I'm going to have you see a psychiatrist, see if you have medication or depression issues. But at a certain point, if you haven't stopped acting out, or you're still lying, keeping secrets and not really moving forward, I have run out of things that I can do as an outpatient therapist. And my job is to say, I think if this isn't working, then maybe you need another place to go. It's sort of like drug addiction. If somebody can't stop with all the support I give them outpatient and they're still using, they need to go someplace where they'll stop using and deal with the issues underneath. Sometimes in outpatient therapy, issues come up that people don't know how to handle, and it means they end up acting out over them because they have a therapist who's looking at, say, a trauma rather than the addiction head on. What we do. First of all, I've been running treatment programs for 25 years, so I've opened them for multiple treatment centers around the world, and I pretty much know what good treatment is. And what we're doing in treatment is a number of things. We're looking for where this came from. what kind of issues happen, because many people walk in, honest to goodness, and say, I have no idea why I have this problem. And so as we go through their timelines and history, it becomes pretty clear what their issues are and where they came from. We're not there to necessarily work through all these issues, but the goal is to help that person understand that they are not a bad person. They didn't necessarily mean to hurt people. They didn't mean, but they're very broken. And let's look at why. So that reduces shame. When someone can look at their past and say, oh, I'm not a horrible person who meant to hurt people. I just really broken. And what I did in my brokenness hurt people. That's part of that. Another thing we do is teach relapse prevention. So when you feel like acting out, when you want to go see that sex worker, when you're just dying to look at the porn, and that will happen, what do you do instead? Where do you go? What do you do? And how do you create the resources in your life so that when you're in trouble, you know what to go through, where to go? Because if you never call people and have a regular relationship with them for support, you're certainly not going to call them when you're in trouble. The other thing that I think treatment is really about is social relationships. When we have one person in treatment, we are working really intensely with them around psychotherapy, but when we have a bunch of them, and I think we're going to have a bunch in a couple of days, actually, then it's all about their interaction. How do they treat each other? Tammy has often said, well, I often say we turn boys to men. Tammy will say we teach men how to become good husbands, if that's what they are. And what that means is we're trying to, among the men who are there, we're teaching them to be empathic, to show up for each other, and if they're not, they'll confront each other in ways that, let me put it this way. I have said to many men in treatment, X, Y, and Z. And they look at me and they say, honest to God, they say, my wife has said the same things to me for 3 years, but I could never hear it. And when you said it, I was able to hear it. And that isn't because they don't love you. It's because oftentimes addicts just want to block out anything bad that they don't want anything to do with the bad stuff. They just want to focus on the good. And so they tell you, I don't want to hear about it, stop nagging me, but they're not going to tell that to me. And so being able to use authority to challenge people in a healthy way is part of the work. There's a lot we do in treatment. Oh, one more thing. We set you up to go home. So I was saying this to someone today. You don't just go home. A couple of days before you go home, we create a whole list of what you're going to do home, what you're going to do on Monday, what you're going to do on Tuesday. We look up 12-step meetings in your neighborhood. We find you the right therapist. And then we give this list of things you have agreed to do to your therapist and to your spouse and to you. And that way, if you're struggling at home, someone can pull out the list and say, well, here's some things you need to be doing. And I just want to say the last thing. I've done treatment, residential treatment for 25 years. And I can tell you that 90% of the time, the people who struggle at home struggle because they didn't do what's on the list. They like, oh my God, I went back to the porn. But are you going to the 3 meetings a week? Well, no, I'm just at 2. It's really about taking direction and being willing to follow it, because addicts run their own show without any help whatsoever. And treatment is about really helping people surrender to how vulnerable they really are, and then help them ask for help every single day.
I agree to all that. I think one of the things that I see is that you can go to a therapist and but within 50 minutes, you're probably going to talk mostly about what happened this week. So getting to those underlying issues that you were talking about, Dr. Rob, it's really tough to do that. And so in between, you and your loved ones, if you're in a marriage, you and your spouse are in this chaos for 12 to 18 months. So what we do in 14 days is not a miracle and fix everything, but we give a solid foundation on which to build, and really accelerates that, I think, that timeline, so that the loved ones and the person, living in that uncomfortable of not acting out but not really having the tools is very challenging. So, I think not everybody can come to treatment, but man, for those that can, we hear life-changing from our alumni consistently. And I've shared this with people. I've gotten calls from partners and spouses who have said, I don't know what you did, but I got a different man back than the one I sent. This has been life-changing. I was like, that's when we know that they've taken the plan and they've implemented it at home, and their loved one is seeing that. That's awesome.
The 2 things we're looking for when they go home with you spouses is, 1, honesty, for them to no longer be lying, be absolutely clear. Even if they forget to take out the garbage, they're going to tell you. And the other hand is that they have an active role in their healing, that you are not. I just talked to a spouse like now, and I said, does he go to meetings? Yeah, when I tell him to. Does he go to group when I ask him? That's not your job. We have to be self-motivated and show to you that we are committed to healing for ourselves. That's what your partners are looking for.
Okay, so the next question, how can I help to reduce triggers that my partner experiences because of my addiction?
Okay, I think this person is saying, I'm married to a man or a woman, I'm involved with a man or a woman, and I've cheated on them and hurt them through my addiction. And they get really easily triggered into anger and upset with me. Is that what you think this
That's
person's
what
saying?
I'm getting. I'm thinking that they're triggered by the, yes, I think you're on point.
Okay, so spouses get triggered by all kinds of things. And I have to say to you that you kind of have to let them. Instead of saying, oh, well, that's not right, or I didn't really do this, or why are you reacting to that? That's guaranteed to make them upset and angry. So I'll give you an example of what spouses go through. A little story, but real quick. I worked with a couple that was doing really, really well. And they decided about 8 months of real hard work that they were going to go up to the mountains and spend a weekend together in a cabin and reignite their relationship and their sexual life. And they did. They have a wonderful time walking through the woods and enjoying. So after the weekend, this is absolutely true, they were driving down from the mountain and there were some billboards. And the wife looked up and there was a Victoria's Secret billboard, and it reminded her of all of the women he had looked at, been with. And then after that lovely weekend, they're driving down the hill and she got triggered by seeing that billboard. And she turns to him and says, stop the car. I don't want to be with you. I can't believe. Now, two things are going on at that moment. One is, no matter how stable and comfortable we start to feel with our spouses, there's always going to be something that reminds us that they broke our trust and they hurt us. It's impossible to not run into that. Less as time goes by, but not to run into it. The other is, just for you spouses, what happens for you, I think, is you get hopeful that things are better, but you're also ambivalent about us, meaning you love us, but you hate us. And part of what goes on for you spouses is you can't believe that you didn't see this coming and you didn't know about it. You're mad at yourselves sometimes, not so much blaming, but mad. And so when you let yourself, you spouses, open up to the addict, you get more intimate with us, you're sexual with us, you engage us, that scares you a lot of times. Like that woman going down the mountain in the car, she didn't just see a billboard and think that's what he was doing. She thought, how can I trust him again if that's what he was doing? I can't believe I made love with him and we got connected, because that's how he's going to hurt me. So even though they love us and invest in us, what might come up, as we say sometimes, love sometimes brings up its opposite, is she or he might get angry because they let themselves be close to you, and last time they let themselves be close to you, they got hurt. So partners are ambivalent for a year or more, and that's provided we're doing all of our work, showing up, helping them, being honest. But partners have a rough ride. I wrote a book about this called Out of the Doghouse, so that men can understand what it's like when they betray a woman, because it's a whole complex thing. Most guys don't get it. So more questions?
Yeah, and he adds, how can I stop lashing out? And I think that happens regularly, so I would like you to address that.
Is that the spouse is lashing out, or the
No,
addict is saying?
no, it's the addict is lashing out at the partner. So,
Well, see, if I was counseling your partner, I would tell them to leave you. So that's how serious your lashing out is. And if you can't control of your anger, then you need to look at that in therapy. The last thing your spouse needs after you've betrayed them, hurt them, let them down, and they don't know if you can even trust them, is you're raging at them, because they are so hurt. And so basically when you get angry at them, you're basically saying, I'm the one who gets to have the feelings here and you don't. And it should be the other way around. They get to have all these feelings. One more thing. I tell spouses, I think I said this already, but I'll say it again. Spouses have two jobs, and only two. One is to hate us and think we've ruined their lives and deal with their anger at us. And the other is decide if they want to be with us or not. That's their job. Maybe number three is getting support for themselves. But that's it. We're the ones with the problem. So your spouse didn't do anything wrong. And I got to tell you, for the guys who say, or women who say, well, they were a little heavy, they're not paying attention to me, I deserve. Listen, if you're unhappy in your marriage, go get a divorce. Go see a marriage counselor. Go buy something you can't afford. But being unhappy in your relationship and choosing to cheat, that's on the person who does it.
Okay, so the next question, how can you identify a good therapist who doesn't subscribe to codependency model? This is from a female partner.
Well, that's kind of hard to do. So let me say quickly, I'm a very anti-codependence person. I watched the whole thing arise in the 80s. And I'll just tell you, I did my PhD dissertation on codependency, and it's never been a diagnosis. It's never been in our clinical books. It's never been something you can bill insurance for. And from the best I could find out of all of my research, codependency is a pop culture phenomenon. It doesn't really meet mental health criteria. It kind of blames people for the love they give. So I wrote a book called Codependence, which really turns codependency on its ear and says, wait a minute, maybe the people who hang in there with us, despite all the problems we give them, maybe they're not broken because they do that. Maybe they hang in there with us because they love us, because they see the potential that might be in the relationship, and they're hoping that the good stuff comes back. So rather than saying there's something wrong with you for being this, with this, what Codependence says is you're probably with this person for all the right reasons, and if they get better, things can really get better. So good for you for staying. I'm not saying people should put up with physical abuse or violence, but if that isn't going on and the person's just a mess, if you love them, you might stay around a while. And I think that's part of your strength, is the love you give. So I just put this book out in 2018. The clinical guide and workbook for therapists to learn about it isn't even out yet. It'll be out next year. So I don't think you'll find a lot of therapists who do this work, but you might find people do it online. I think we have a couple of Codependence drop-in groups. And maybe, depending on where you live, if you write Tammy at seekingintegrity.com, Tammy at seekingintegrity.com, Tammy might have a couple of resources for you. So I'd write her and check out our website. Tammy, you can direct them to that as well.
I will.
Where we do Codependence groups.
And I wanted to tag on to that. So if you are already working with a therapist and you mostly feel good about it, it's fair to say, here's a copy of Codependence. I found this really useful. And, you know, some of the language you're using, you know, is bothersome to me. Could you look at this and just see? Because I have found that many therapists are really, I mean, Dr. Rob gets, thank you. I have not used codependency, but they didn't have in fact, a lot of them say, I wish I'd written the book, you know, I wish, you know, but anyway, that's a whole nother thing, but they really align with it. So it could be, like he said, that it just came out in 2018 and they haven't really heard, you know, it is kind of a grassroots effort. There's lots of partners that are going, this resonates with me, and I need that to be. Now I've also had where his therapist keeps using codependent. So again, you know, I think it's fair to have the conversation, and, you know, it isn't helpful for the relationship if, you know, if you're really bothered by the language and blamed, you know, and pathologized. So.
And part of that, I just want to add really quickly, is to me, there's something in the codependency model that kind of says, you know, my spouse is kind of responsible for my behavior. And if they were acting differently, or if they'd worked through their issues, I wouldn't be doing this. And I think that's wrong. I think that if an alcoholic chooses to drink, they're going to drink, and you can't stop them, and you didn't make it happen. So, but we will say to you, oh, I wouldn't be drinking if you weren't nagging and complaining. We will blame you for codependency because that allows us to go act out. Read Codependence, you'll throw it at them.
And,
we got a lot of questions.
Well, yeah, we do. And on the same link that you found this on sexandrelationshiphealing.com, you'll find the drop-in group. So, okay, I'm a single gay man who was a sex addict long before used meth. Now there is a fusion of sex and meth in my brain. I'm making a new attempt for a 90-day complete sexual abstinence. In the past, my sex addiction made it real hard to reach 90 days of sexual abstinence. What kind of tools can an addict use to reach 90 days?
Okay, so it's not on you. I mean, Tam, I may need you. I have a lot of questions in there, so I may need you to ask it again. But
yes.
One of the things I'm just going to say is, if you go to treatment for your meth addiction, they're not going to necessarily give you everything you need, and that's because most drug and alcohol centers are really focused on drug and alcohol. And if you go there and you have a sexual problem, you're never going to want to talk about it. They certainly don't know how to deal with it. So just in treatment or working with people, having an organization that looks at both, because they're paired, like you said. When you use meth, you want to have sex, and when you're having sex, you want to use meth. They're paired, and that means they both need to be looked at. There's a book that our colleague who works with us at Seeking Integrity wrote called Lust, Men, and Meth. I really advise you to read it. It's sort of the book on this issue, and if you're a gay guy and you have a meth problem, you'll get it right away. Meth, just to say, is it is the most addictive drug, more than heroin, more than nicotine. It is the most addictive drug we have. It's very difficult to get off of, and people slip often. They need to set sexual boundaries, right? Because if you go to see sex workers, or, you know, go to strip clubs or whatever, you know, or hook up on one of your apps, that may be where the drugs are. So you have to reorganize your sexual life in order to make sure you're not spending time with people or going to places where the drugs are. By the way, drinking is out too, because when you drink, you get disinhibited, and then it's like, oh, well, I feel like doing everything. Tammy, the question again, sorry, I knew there was a lot there.
It said, I'm making a new attempt for 90-day
Right.
complete sexual abstinence. In the past, it was really hard to reach it. What kind of tools can an addict use to reach 90 days?
Well, again, like any addict, I think you need a lot of support. But in this case, you're kind of what we'd call a double dipper, which means you have two different problems. You have meth as drugs are a problem and sex is a problem. You have to go to both 12-step programs. You have to get support in NA or Meth Addicts Anonymous or CMA, whatever that is for you. And you need to go to sex addiction meetings. And I'll tell you why. A lot of drug addiction meetings, people are sleeping with each other. They're hitting on each other. You know, they're not looking at that piece. And you don't want to go to a 12-step meeting where that's going to happen. So you might go to your drug and alcohol meeting, but then separately talk about sex somewhere where people are comfortable talking about it. You can't go to an AA or an NA meeting and talk about sex, and you're really not encouraged to go to sex and love meetings and talk about drugs. So unless you're in treatment that deals with both in real life, you've got to find resources for both of those things, because both exist together and separately.
I just added to the chat that Dr. David Fawcett has a chemsex group, one of the very few in the rooms on Tuesday nights. So I put that information on there. And then immediately following this group, Skip Spear has the Cruise Control Gay Men's Sex Addiction Group. Highly recommend you join that group. You know, that's at 6:05 Pacific time. So right, it follows this one on Monday night. So there are some resources. Dr. David does a
They're free.
like this. Yeah, Dr. David does a webinar on Wednesday night, just like Dr. Rob does at 5 p.m. So next question.
One more thing. I wrote a book called Cruise Control.
Yes.
Cruise Control, like in your car. It's the only book for gay men, period, on sex addiction. And I think I've had clients read Dr. Fawcett's book on meth and then my book on sex. And between the two, you really get the whole picture, because there really isn't anything that focuses on both in writing. Not yet.
Not yet. Okay. So the next question, I will be attending our program this next weekend. I'm supposed to do this for me, but I can't stop thinking I'm doing this for our marriage, even though it's probably over. So we get that a lot. So can you speak to that?
Well, there's a difference between longing for your spouse, loving your spouse, wishing things could be better, being really sorry that they didn't work out, and I need to get better so they're going to be with me. You get to have all your feelings about it: sadness, grief, loneliness. But if your spouse is ever going to be with you again, it has to do with the work you've done on yourself, not the work that you've done for your spouse. And let me give an example. This is my favorite one that happened recently. And so maybe you guys were there when I had a guy say to me in one of these rooms, you know, I'm doing so much better in my recovery. And I was like, really? Tell me about that. And he said, well, a month ago I was in the guest house, and then a month later I was in the living room, and then a month or two later I was in the guest room, and now I'm sleeping with my wife again. So I'm doing really great. And I said, what does that have to do with your own healing? If the goal is to just get back with somebody, that's not the problem. Your problem is you are broken, and being with that person is not going to fix you. And unfortunately, you didn't fix yourself before they decided they might not want to be with you. Well, it's not too late now to fix yourself and not screw up the next relationship. And if you have kids, you really want to get present for them and co-partner with your spouse, regardless of whether you stay together or not. I hope you and your spouse remain friends. I think that's really important.
What is the start to changing my addiction?
Well, I can tell you what motivates. So I've probably treated 1,000 people in my career. If you figure, I don't know, a couple of hundred every year, it's definitely, even more than that. And singularly, maybe, okay, so out of 1,000, see the fingers on this hand, there's 5. Out of 1,000, maybe 5 came to me or came to treatment because they didn't like who they were. They weren't happy with the way they were living. They wanted to be a better husband, wife, father. People don't come to treatment for that. They think it, but they don't come to treatment for that. Now, 995 people I work with came to treatment because they were in trouble with their spouse, their work. They weren't getting through with school. They couldn't form a relationship. They were losing their lives to porn. People come to treatment because they're in a crisis, and they want that crisis to get better. Now, sometimes people will say to me, well, how sincere can that be if they're just going there because they want to make their wife happy or because they want to get out of a crisis? And my answer is, it doesn't matter what what gets you into treatment. What matters is what we do with you once you get there. I don't care if you're there because you were in the newspaper or somebody left you. What I care about is what happens in the work. Whatever gets you there is golden. So did I answer that all, Tammy? I talk a lot, so sometimes I forget.
No, I think that was good. So, what are some things I can do in recovery to help bring feelings back? I am the addict.
Okay, I'm not sure. Can you define what you think that person means and by bringing feelings back? What do you think, Tammy?
What I read was, and I think as addicts, we're so used to numbing out and so being disconnected, that you just trying to reconnect to feelings is challenging. I also wondered with this one, because I know, we've talked and Dr. David has talked about, particularly for those that have used the co-occurring, have used chemicals, particularly meth, there's no good feelings for a while. So maybe talk a little in general.
Well, so I'll just say what happened to me. I don't know if Tammy knows this story, but I went to therapy. I went to 25 years of therapy. Okay, that's how screwed up I am and how sad my childhood was. But here I am, and at one point in the therapy, hold on a second, I'll answer that question. I had a therapist. I said to them, I'm not in touch enough with my feelings. I think I need to have more feeling. Where are my feelings? And the therapist said, I think you have too many. And it was interesting because I was looking for the thing to cry, to make it come out of me so I could kind of get some stuff out. And first of all, recovery is not a destination, it's a process. So some people think, well, if I just get to therapy and work on this, or if I just work on that, then I'm going to work through this and the problem will be over. No, this isn't like having an appendix cut out. This is something that you have to live with the rest of your life. So what I did to recreate feelings or to get into the kind of feelings I wanted to get into was build meaningful relationships with people in recovery. I remember, I don't know if I ever told you this, Tammy, but the first time I cried in a 12-step meeting, someone asked me to read the promises, the things that happen to you when you really work on this. And I swear I was 2 years in meetings, just marching along. And then all of a sudden someone asked me to read this literature, and it was about not being ashamed of the past, being able to hope for the future, and that everything I'd been through would be a platform to live a great life. And I never believed that could happen. So I waited 2 years till I was sitting in a meeting just reading something, and I fell apart because that was what I needed. Some people are watching a movie or listening to music, they fall apart. I can't say what that is for you. I do think having the way you will get in touch with your feelings and be able to tolerate them is if you have really supportive, stable people around who you can turn to and will help you through it. We shouldn't really get through feelings by ourselves. We're supposed to turn to other people. That's what healthy people do. Addicts, not so much. Addicts have a feeling, they go act out. Healthy people, they talk to a friend. And that's what we are trying to get you guys to do.
Well, and I think what Dr. Rob was just talking about is the promises to come through. It says before we are halfway through, we will get to experience some of those. So I would wonder if you're working through the steps, and that doesn't mean just warming a seat at the meetings. That means like, are you actively engaged in working through the steps? I mean, that's what really started connecting the dots for me. So you can absolutely do it in therapy and things too, but I had the opposite. Well, I knew, somebody said, what are you feeling? And I was like, I don't know. I'm just feeling everything and it's too much. I could not tolerate any good or bad feelings. So where you were feeling a lot, but you were like not in touch with them, I felt them way too much. So it is really a process. And I love what you said about it's a journey, and, we just keep, making, steps forward, sometimes a little half step back, but, it's really so rich as we start to explore that. So
I want to say one quick thing.
Sure.
I would ask you to think out, what is a feeling? Like, are you thinking I have to burst into tears and weep? Or because a feeling might just be how warm feeling it's seeing a friend, or feeling good about yourself that you haven't acted out. Or, those are feelings. They end up be huge demonstrative feelings, but they're still feelings. I would say pay attention to the ones you have rather than looking for the ones you don't.
Oh, that's great. Okay, if you're in pre-disclosure, how do you navigate living with the addicted partner if you feel you're justified anger is being prematurely cooled over by love bombing or even healthy behavior. How do you prevent resuming the process of building new trust automatically before you've heard the potential worst?
Okay, I'm not sure. Can you narrow that down for me? I think I know what that says, but
So
this person's
they
going to
haven't
have
had
disclosure.
disclosure,
Right.
and they're angry. It's like you were talking about. It's I'm angry, and I hate you, but I love
I
you,
love
and
you. Right.
the ambivalent love, and then this person, the addict, is clearly love bombing, and
Oh,
or they said, or even healthy behavior, but like it's such a disconnect for them because how do they trust? How do they start to build trust when they're going like, well, there could be a whole bunch of stuff I don't know.
so this is the perfect setup for what I said earlier, which is, when do you go to couples therapy? And I said in the beginning, which is where you are right now, you go to them to say, how do I handle all the questions? How do I deal with my anger? How do we talk about things without getting into this issue constantly? And that's why that person is there, to help you set some boundaries, some structure. I'll give you an example, a little one. I have couples who just drive each other crazy asking questions. Well, did you do this? Did you do that? Well, I have to tell you this. I have to tell you that. And they do it all day long. And oftentimes the addict feels like, oh, well, I have to tell them this because I've done these awful things. I need to let them know. And the spouse is saying things like, if you don't let me know X, Y, and Z. So how about this? How about saying, you know what? From 7 to 8 o'clock every evening, we're going to stop and talk about this, and half hours for you and a half hours for me. And we're absolutely going to do that every day, or whenever you set your time. The point is, and this is a little thing that a couples therapist might do, if you both know that this is going to happen and you will have time to talk about it, maybe you won't talk about it in front of your kids. Maybe you won't talk about it screamed at each other during the day. I think this person says something else, didn't they? Their husband's not interested in what? Maybe it's in the
I
chat.
said, what are some things I can do in recovery? Oops, that's the wrong one. So sorry.
No, I think oh, here it is. She said, my husband is not interested in having sex. His best friend is gay.
No, that's a whole nother question. I haven't gotten to that.
Okay, sorry.
So this one was, how do you prevent resuming process of building new trust automatically before you've heard the potential worst?
That's not happening. You're not going to rebuild trust. Trust takes a year or more to rebuild. And in the pre-disclosure stage, there's no reason to have any trust. So I would suggest to you, stop trying to have trust in someone that you have no reason to trust, and start turning to people that you do trust, whether that's your sister, your aunt, your clergy, or other people in recovery. We're the ones you can trust. The other women who are being betrayed, you can trust them. This person you're married to or involved with, not yet, and not for a while. And if you don't trust someone, don't open up to them.
And get support from other people who can truly support you. So, okay, next question. I am a partner of a sex addict in recovery. My family knows the truth, and we're very supportive to me and my husband when I discovered his addiction 2 years ago. Yesterday, my mother asked for help on my dad's work phone. I saw so much porn on my mom, and my mom was asking me how to delete it. It feels like, oh, wow, D-Day all over again, but I feel betrayed by my mom and dad. I started panicking and had to leave immediately. My husband and my recovery is strong, and we are doing better than ever. I've learned and set boundaries within the marriage, but I'm so hurt and don't know how to move forward with my family. I feel so hurt that my mom would ever think it was okay, and don't think how this would affect me, knowing I've already experienced it in my marriage. I'm also hurt and disgusted with my dad. How do I mend this relationship with my mom and dad after this?
Wow, that's a lot of questions.
Yeah.
Well, first of all, I never think it's a good idea to know about your parents' sex life, no matter how old you are. I don't care if you're 40 or 12. You can tell people we're having problems, we're struggling with things, but I would never want to tell my children about that. So unless they already knew. So just to say that. Look, I think the thing to notice here we say something in therapy, detachment is a wonderful thing. To be able to sit back and look at the whole situation and just take your emotions out of it for a moment. How sad the situation is. Your mother has dealt with this her whole life. Now you're dealing with it. Your dad has dealt with this his whole life. Now your husband is dealing with it. The intergenerational issues there. Truly, over time, the meaningful conversations that you as four of you could have. But first, everybody has to be working on this. So if your dad doesn't even know what your mom's been looking at, that they're a long way from that. Second of all, I just want to say, I'm sort of glad that your mom trusts you enough to turn to you for support. I don't know that this is the right thing to turn to you for support for, but I'm glad that she feels close enough to her daughter to turn to her. And maybe she even feels like, you know, you've been through this and maybe you can help me with it. So I understand that you feel victimized, like my mom shouldn't have shown me this, understand what I'm going through. But if you can take one step outside yourself for a moment and see what's going on for them, your mom probably reached out to you because she's clueless and doesn't know what to do. And maybe you know something and she's hurting a lot. You know, you may not be able to help her, but we're offering a lot. She can go to the old ladies posse and check in with those other women. I don't think you should be in groups or support with her, but you can direct her because you know things. And then you can also say, but mom, I don't want to know about this. Tell me that you and dad are working on it, that things are going better, but I don't want to see the porn. I don't want to know. That's really hard for me. Please respect that.
Yeah, I was thinking how challenging having, you know, a generation up that that doesn't know how to deal with the technology, and
Right.
and you know, I don't know how old, but you know, I know my parents, it's like, oh, sex is all, you know, very, we don't talk about it, you know, oh, it's just terrible. So to have to go, I don't know what to do, and to be reaching out. So yeah, it definitely feels, I can understand the betrayal and all that, but I really appreciate what Dr. Rob said of like, if you can just look at the lens of like how hard that must have been for your mom to, you know, to deal with, and, you know, and point your dad to some, here's some resources, and, you know, but then say, yeah, I can't be here to support this right now. So I'm sorry
And,
for you
and
though.
there is one more thing I want to say, which
Sure.
is, sorry, Tammy, I talked over you.
Have
Did you have
at it.
something
I'm
else you
done.
want to say?
No,
I
no,
spoke over you.
no,
I'm
that was
sorry.
it for that one. So please. So yeah.
So one of the things that sex addiction or porn addiction or these relationship disorders come from are families that keep secrets. It's very typical for me to run into someone who had, their mother was having affairs, their dad was looking at all this porn, your dad had affairs, and mom and dad were fighting all the time. But when a kid comes up and says, what's going on? Nobody talks. There's people dealing with stuff, but no one will tell me what it is. So on some level, even though you're not children, the idea that your mom wants to crack the egg and open up and talk about this, I think that she wants to be closer to you. And, you know, I understand your feelings, and maybe you can't help her, but I wouldn't see it in terms of she wanted me to feel bad or she wasn't thinking about me. I think she was just really hurting and wanted someone to support her.
So the next question is, according to 12-step programs, it is not a place to find, have sex, love, partner. Why? I feel like I can see the idea to find someone there whom knows the true natures of my wrong and will allow healing for both, true codependency, but all straight. Is there a healthy way to engage in true healing and recovery?
I'm spitting out my gum, sorry. Anyway. Wow, that's another big question. Why don't you start, Tammy?
Well, I'm the example of why you don't date people in meetings, because married someone, found my true love in recovery, and it really was problematic. So it you know, like I waited till after a year in recovery, but yeah, you know, I was still really immature. He was really immature, you know. So I think it would depend. I think that there are some things to do. I would not date anybody that goes to my meetings, because then it crashes my meetings. So I'm the example of like, you know, like now I'm married to somebody who gets me, but isn't like, accepts me for all my warts and everything. But he isn't an addict, hasn't had to deal with any of that, doesn't have it in his family history. So I don't think there's a general rule other than, you know, no 13th stepping. And I would not be cruising 12-step meetings looking for, you know, someone, you know, that's problematic too. So what are your thoughts, Dr. Rob? Hello.
Well, I was gonna say you get what you pay for. That's not what I wanted to say. I was gonna say you get what you pay for, but that's not what I wanted to say. So here's a really psychological way to look at it. I think the best couples, and this is codependence, one person has some vulnerabilities, the other person has strengths. So you lean into each other in ways that support each other. So if you're an addict, you might have some very similar vulnerabilities to another addict. So for example, Tammy will tell you, I'm very impatient. I'm very demanding. I want things when I want them, and I can be a real jerk. But I'm married to someone who's so patient. And it's almost hard for me to be demanding in the face of all that patience. But if we were both impatient, we would drive each other crazy. I used to think, oh, I want to meet a professional who has a nice car and a great job because I'm a professional. We would kill each other. I need someone who's not so driven by their work, not like me at all, but where I'm vulnerable, they're strong. And where they're vulnerable, I'm strong. My spouse has never, I don't think, bought a plane ticket, never planned a vacation, never done our checkbook. Those are things I'm strong in. So, we balance each other, and that is a good relationship. Each one of you don't have to do everything, but you should, that's just codependence. You support each other where you're vulnerable. So I'd be worried about dating an addict because I would think they might be just as screwed up in some of the very same ways as me.
Yeah.
As Tammy's first husband was.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, I wish him well, all good and all that. But, my husband, who we've been married almost 30 years now, he is like you're talking about with your husband. It's like, he's the balance. I'm, more driven. He's Mr. Zen, Mr. Calm, so, like I bring energy and excitement to his life, and he brings calm to mine. It's all
Right.
good. Yeah. Okay. Next question.
Yeah. I don't think my husband would ever, I don't think my husband would ever go out in the world, unless I said, let's go to dinner, let's go to the movies. But I want to go out all the time, and he's taught me how to stay home and have that be okay. Simple, but true.
I'm going,
what,
yes.
you're living your life through my,
I'm going like, yes, I like to go out and I need social.
Right.
He's like, no.
You also drive sports cars. Did y'all know
I
that
do
Tammy
drive
drives sports cars? Yes.
We have a car thing. So, okay. Next question. My husband has been working recovery from an 11-year sex addiction for the past 15 months. We are still together in marriage, and I have concerns about his therapy since his CSAT therapist has told him he can now move from weekly therapy to every other week therapy sessions. I am concerned about the reduction in therapy at this stage of his recovery. What would some appropriate questions for me to ask his therapist about my husband's therapy? Or is there appropriate for me to talk to his therapist? Those are both great questions. So is it appropriate for a partner to talk to the therapist? Let's start with that one.
It's appropriate to ask to. It's fine to say, I'm feeling uncomfortable with some things and I would love to go to therapy with you and see if I can work them out with you. And that would really help me to talk, because it's hard for us to have some of these conversations at home without a neutral person. And there should be no reason why a therapist wouldn't say, oh, we'd be glad to have you. Maybe they want to see you alone, but with your spouse, yes. And that's, for us therapists, that's useful because we learn what we call collateral information. I learn a lot about your husband or wife by meeting your spouse and seeing how they look at things and where they're coming from. But I did write something else down, Tammy. I wrote down addicts lie, okay? So just because he says his therapist said to go twice a month, that therapist might have said, I need you to come twice a week. But he said, no, I don't have the money, I don't have the time. And he said, how about twice a month? Maybe the therapist said, okay, because we're not going to fight you. But I would question what was said, and I would want to hear it from the therapist.
Well, and then the other, what are questions to ask? If you're the partner, what would you ask?
You're asking me?
Yeah.
I'm not a partner. What would you ask?
Okay. So I'm not a partner either, but here's one of the things. Yeah. So here's one of the things I was wondering about is, he's been working on this for 15 months. I hear the level of distrust, and so I'm like, have you seen progress? Are you seeing what, he's saying his therapist is seeing, that, he can cut back down? I mean, if you're seeing some obvious signs that he's more trustworthy, he's more open. I mean, if you're seeing positive things, then it may be time to cut back. But I'm saying it's a she, if she goes to the husband's therapist, after this scheduled time, what are some questions that a partner could ask the therapist, about, where the husband's at or whatever. So.
And I don't think you spouses will ever fully trust us again, not ever really. But I think that over time, you learn to trust your gut. you know, and you really learn to feel like, I think things are moving along and we see more connect, or I don't get it. There's something in the way. You will know and you will feel. And by the way, you're not always right. I tell this to the addicts. They're not always right, but what difference does it make? They were right the last time or 3 times from now, or so it doesn't matter whether they're right now. What matters is they're feeling uncomfortable, and you got to pay attention to that.
So the next question, do you think a couples therapist needs to have a background in sex addiction? How can you find one that understands the issue but isn't part of the codependency orthodoxy?
You call Tammy at seekingrecovery.com. And one of the things we do for everyone free is we offer resources, and we don't get kickbacks or, you know, money from the people we refer. But Tammy and I have been in this field a very long time. We know a lot of people who are well trained in most urban areas, and we will make recommendations.
So here's the thing too. It's like, you know, I think it is important for someone to have the background in addiction and sex addiction, because if you go to a generalist therapist who does great work, you know, if you're depressed or whatever, if they don't have the tools to help you with what's going on, it's like Dr. Rob was talking about earlier with the clients that are, you know, have been going to a sex therapist rather than a sex addiction therapist. You don't get what you need if you don't go to the right doctor. So we're the right person. So I would really want to make sure that they have that. And like I started out with earlier, you can hand them the books, Codependence. There's podcasts, free podcasts. They can listen to the podcast, you know, on codependence and learn. And if you go, gosh, this person really aligns with this and understands, you know, partner betrayal trauma, great, you know, so.
I saw a question I want to answer. Is that okay?
Sure.
I happen to look ahead, which is, I think it was, here it is. What are definite signs of healing? I think that's a really interesting question, but
Okay,
Tammy's kind of said it. So I don't know if this is an addict asking for themselves or a partner, but for a partner, I would say you are starting to believe that their walk is matching their talk. So what they're saying, they're actually doing. What they're doing, they're actually saying. You're not finding lies. You're not finding secrets. They seem to be showing up. They're on time. If you call, let's go for a walk, they don't say, oh, well, I'll get to it when I'm done on the computer. They get ready. They begin to respect who you are, what you need. It's a felt thing. However, most addicts don't get there in the first 8 months to a year, because in the beginning, we're just trying to figure out who we are. And we don't even know how the ways we've hurt you. But around 15 months, this person should certainly be able to have a lot of empathy, a lot of support. You should be much more trusting. Oh, that's not the 15 months, but nonetheless. Now, what was the other end of that question? If you're an addict, what are the signs of healing? You will always be driven and have the desire to act out. But I think a really good sign is when you want to act out, you do something else. No one healed from addiction by not doing things. It's important to not look at porn, to not act out, but it's by doing things that we really heal. So if you are an addict, are you really embracing the things that you were finding, or are you still, I don't want to do that, I don't like this. This is a whole way of life. It's not just about recovery, is about how you live, how you interact with everyone, how you do your life. And that's a way of living honesty, integrity, a consistent, nurturing relationship with other people. You either embrace that life or you don't. There really isn't, it's kind of black and white. So if you've embraced a life of recovery as an addict, you're on the right road.
This is from the person that had also said, how do I stop lashing out? Lashing out would not be a sign of healing. So like,
right.
Yeah, I mean that, you know, if you're still lashing out at your loved one, you know, that is going to set things back, you know, 4 steps. So.
And one more thing for both of you, or all of you, if your spouse is really angry and you want to scream at your partner, go to a support group with other partners and say, I just want to kill this person, because that's where you can vent all of your anger. Not that you don't want to bring it to the relationship, but a little bit cooled. If you know, kind of having put it out there first. And by the way, we say to the addicts, if they've had a slip or they've returned to old behavior, they have to go to their support people and sort out their feelings and then come to you and say, this is what's happened, not run to you the minute it's happened and I'm sorry, and please don't get angry. And that's not going to help.
Well, and, you know, instead of lashing out at your loved one, you know, saying, you know, I need 20 minutes. Like, I want to talk to you about this, but I need 20 minutes, or let's have that during our scheduled 7 to 8 p.m. tonight, you know? So, there are so many tools. Like we've talked about, Dr. Rob, one of the things of it just takes a long time. And that's the difference of we can, you know, at Seeking Integrity, we can help compress that time frame. So
one more thing about lashing out.
Mm-hmm.
If you're being cruel or mean to your partner, then you should separate. It is not fair, especially for the person who's harmed the partner, to then pile on with leave me alone and give me a break. If that's what's going on, I'm not sure that you should be living together until that's how serious that is. The partner's already been devastated and you're going back in and making it worse. That isn't a good situation for anybody.
Okay, the next and probably final question.
I have something to say. Go ahead.
Oh, okay, so we are separated.
No, what's the question?
Okay, we are separated 2 years from his lying and relapses. In December, we decided to start working towards getting back together again. In March, I started to suspect that he relapsed due to his behaviors and actions towards me and isolating more in March, April, and May. 3 weeks ago, I asked him, which he said yes, but would not tell me what he did, his recovery, etc. I'm having a meeting with his therapist and him. Now they are working on a disclosure about his relapse. My husband refuses to do this with his therapist being present. I am feeling uncomfortable with this. I'm incredibly hurt because he chose to turn his back on me during the pandemic and turned it to his addiction instead. I think his therapist did not know all of this until the session we had. My questions are, what is your opinion about him not wanting a therapist present as he claims it's all about money? Also, if his therapist knew about this back in March, why would his therapist have told him, why would his therapist not hold him accountable to tell me? This is the 8th relapse in 4 years.
Well, I have thoughts, but do you want to start?
No, please. We're almost out of time. I want your...
Well, this is what I say to some of you ladies. I don't understand why you hang on to us. You know, I know men are important. I know you love us. I know you're attached to us, but there are some situations where, like, if he was hitting you every few months, how long would you put up with that? Because you're getting hit emotionally. And the problem with these slips is just when you begin to think you might trust and hope, maybe you guys can work it out, you're hit with more lies. And then it just starts the problem all over again. So I guess my question to you is this the right relationship to continue? It may well be, but that he has a great grip on recovery, but he's got 5 years to go before anybody would want to live with him. And by the way, one more thing to you spouses, I truly believe that if some of you knew who we fully were when we met you, you would have never married or committed to us. But we keep lies and we keep secrets and all that. And listen, if you're not 20, 30 years in a relationship and we don't have 4 kids and you don't feel like things are getting better, get out. It's really okay to say, I'm going to start again. I don't deserve any more lies. And I've put up with this for a while. And yes, you have every right to talk to the therapist. Let me say to you spouses, you have all the rights. You're the ones in charge. You go to therapy or I'm leaving. You do this. You're in charge. But don't ever threaten to leave unless you're going to. Because once you do that and you say, I'm leaving you if, and then they do that, if you don't leave, you lost all credibility. So best not to say, I'm going to leave, but you can certainly say, I don't want to talk to you. I don't want to sleep with you. A lot of things, I want you in another place. I want to say one more thing. Tammy,
yes,
a little self-promotion here. Tammy and I have created a podcast, which is called
Overcoming Betrayal and Addiction. I've got the name now. Overcoming Betrayal and Addiction.
And it is a Q&A like this with many, many, many people asking questions and us answering them. And it's really, really fun. If you see our podcast cover, we look like the Brady Bunch. I'm looking down, Tammy's looking up. It's really fun. But we just felt, both with sex, love, and addiction, and then this. Look, I listen to a lot of podcasts that are fun. They're about sports. They're about music. They're about fashion, whatever. But what we're talking about in these podcast is about saving relationships and healing families. And I actually think one of the reasons that we have, oh my God, Tammy, almost 500,000 downloads on sex, love, and addiction is because people are hearing real content that's going to help guide their lives. So you and I are up. I think we get launched in a week or two, and I'm really excited about the podcast. We'll let everybody know if they want to hear it.
Okay. So to answer this question, though.
Yes.
8th relapse in 4 years.
I already said that.
Okay, so
get out of there.
Okay.
Go put them in another bedroom. Look, I'll say this again. I don't mean to be rude in any way.
No.
The only reason that addicts ever truly want to get well is they're faced with a crisis. If you've been patient and looking for things to get better and looking for the good stuff, but this person isn't really working on it, they will continue to act out and try to lie to you forever. If they believe that they can pull the wool over your eyes and not fully commit to treatment, they will. So it might just take, you're saying, 4 relapses, I think you need to live somewhere else until you got your program together. And that might be really hard for you, but not as hard as continuing to live with someone you don't trust who's lying to you. This is not a relationship in its current form that I would want to actively be in, because it hurts too much.
And I want to tag on, because why would his therapist not hold him accountable? Maybe his therapist did. You know, the therapist can't call you directly. So
right.
Like Dr. Rob said, addicts lie. And so unless you were in the room when the therapist said whatever the therapist said, you know, it's been translated from, you know, through someone else's head. So I just want to, I don't know what the therapist said. You don't know what the therapist said. So I'd be cautious about, you know, believing what he said about what his therapist said. So
thank you, Tammy, for spending the time tonight.
Thank you all for joining us. I'm sorry we did not get to everybody's questions. But yeah,
I will be on intherooms.com on Friday, and even though we get about 275 people there every week, come on Friday, intherooms.com, and answer your questions. I think it's 6 o'clock Friday night, California time, just 1 hour after this, and it's a lot of fun. I mean, it's a lot of fun, but we get a lot of good questions answered. Thanks, Tammy.
Absolutely. Thank you. Thanks, everybody. Bye-bye.
We'll see you guys soon. Bye for now.